Childlikeness. We've been in this series for just a few weeks now, and this morning, I know last time I spoke with you about being childlike, we talked about being able to trust Him. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 16, gave a very fierce defense of children. When the disciples were arguing about who was going to be the greatest, Jesus came and set a child in the midst of them and said, "Except you turn and become like a child, you will by no means enter heaven." And Jesus told them that, but then he went on, after giving them this example of what it was to be a citizen of heaven in childlikeness, he went on to really throw out some very harsh words in defense of children, saying that if anyone were to cause one of these little ones to sin, it would be better for them that a millstone were hanged around their neck and they were drowned in the bottom of the sea. Jesus used such vivid language to remind us that children are to be enjoyed, children are to be nurtured, children are to be loved. But he also, in his desire to show us his protection for children, revealed some things to us about children. One of those is that children are vulnerable. That's why he gave us such a strong defense to let us know he is watching how we treat children. And he gives us this defense because children are vulnerable. But I want to think about another aspect of being a child, and I'm sure for any of you that have that are parents that have children or grandchildren, you probably, even as a child, may remember a season in your life where you were oblivious to the social norms. You know what I'm saying? When children just don't realize maybe that's not the time for them to speak up and to speak their mind. They have very unvarnished opinions, and they're not afraid to share those in some of the most embarrassing places. I was reading a book by an author named Michael Kelly, and he told a story about taking his kids to the pool at the YMCA. And if you are parents and you have kids in swim diapers, you know that that's just an environment for some real authenticity, right? They have no sense of privacy, children don't. So he was telling this story that as he had one child in the water, the child looked up at him and said what every dad fears at the pool: "Dad, I got to go." And Michael Kelly said, "Son, I don't, do you have to go right now? We're about ready to leave. Can you just hold it?" He said, "No, Daddy, I can't hold it." He said, "Well, I don't want to take you to the bathroom because everybody knows pool bathrooms are fungus infested and gross. And there's nothing worse than trying to get the tight swim diaper, straight jacket, whatever it is, off of the kid and get them to do their business in there while you're all wet feet. It's so gross." So he said, I want, "Can you just wait?" "No, Daddy, I can't. So he turns to his son and says, "Just go in the pool." And the kid looks at him and says, "Daddy, we're not supposed to." He says, "I know, but just this once, it's okay." So he turns back around because his other son is doing some trick off of the side of the pool and wants him to see it. You know how that goes. "Daddy, look at my trick, look at my trick, look at my trick," right? It goes on until you turn and look at the trick. So he turns and he looks at the trick, and when he turns back around, his son, let's pretend this is the side of the pool and you are in the pool. The son has navigated his diaper all the way down to the edge and is standing on the side. Just go it like that. That story illustrates for me, and now for every one of us, I guess, just that kids have this unique view of the world. They don't realize that their authenticity may not necessarily be the proper place, right? They don't understand social norms. They'll say what's on their mind. Kids do indeed say the darndest things. But one of the really remarkable things, and I want to touch on this, about children being authentic and genuine, is that kids are incredibly relational. That's why as parents, we have to warn our children who to talk to and who not to talk to. That's why we have to warn our children not to get in a car with anybody. That's why we give them passwords, that if we as parents are ever not able to pick them up and somebody else is, they got to listen for the family password. And that's because we want them to know that it is okay for you to get in a car with that person, but everybody else you can. It's because our children are vulnerable, because they're authentic, they're genuine, and they're relational. They are incredibly transparent. Now, I know we're looking, some of us, at our children and thinking of them as teenagers, and we're thinking there's nothing transparent. about my teenager. I'm not speaking about all children. I'm speaking about that innocent age of children. Because I believe that's what Jesus was saying when he came and set that child in front of them and said, except you become like this child. Except you become like a child and turn, you will never get into heaven. There's something we can learn from children in their authenticity as it relates to our spiritual life. There's something we can learn about their transparency, how clear they are, how public and relational they are with other people. My family and I were on vacation last week, and I was in line at Splash Mountain at Disney World with Harlow, Hyatt, and another one of their friends that we were vacationing with. And as we're in line, you know those lines take forever. And I got in line, and there was a gentleman, an African-American man, and his granddaughter were in line right in front of us. And as we were going through the line, I listened in on a conversation with Harlow and this guy's granddaughter. And they were talking about their favorite colors. And I remember hearing them say, my favorite color is blue. Do you like my blue dress? Do you like my blue shorts? And they were just going back and forth. And they were playing together. They were talking about all kinds of things, their favorite shows, what they liked, what they didn't like. And this grandfather looked up at me and he said, you know what? He said, it's amazing how easily kids can make friends. And he said, you know what? That's probably good for all of us to learn. What a truth that is. That it's awesome to see how kids they didn't come into that leery of each other. They weren't concerned. They didn't have guard put up. They just saw somebody else that was about their age. They connected with them, and they enjoyed each other's company. And in a matter of moments, they were sharing each other's most deep, dark secrets, like what my favorite color is. Here's the question. If that's who we're supposed to be in this spiritual journey, genuine, authentic, transparent as it relates to relationships, why are we not? Have we grown out of that? Have we become so spiritually mature that we can no longer be that childlike Christian? What does that mean to be childlike in that sense? Does it mean that now I have to go out and share everything with everybody? No, that's not what that means. But how then do I weigh this back out where I can be a child of God, a good citizen of heaven, and still possess those same qualities that Jesus said were in that child as they were vulnerable and needed to be protected, that they were sometimes naive and oblivious to other things, and to be able to be naive enough to build relationships with anybody? How can we have that in our own life, and what are the benefits? If we're going to ask ourselves what happened to that, we have to be able to turn our Bibles to Genesis chapter 3. We see in the beginning what happened. So I want you to see several things out of Genesis chapter 3. So if you're looking there on your devices or your Bible, follow with me. I'm going to abbreviate a bit of this and just give you some quick commentary. Genesis chapter 3, God has created everything He is going to create. He has rested. He has made man the pinnacle of His creation. Everything that God created was good until He made man, and then it was very good. God made man for the express purpose of being made in His image to have fellowship and relationship with Him. That was God's plan. If you're taking notes, the first thing is that God made us. Man was created with perfect fellowship with God and with his wife. Man was created in perfect fellowship with God and his wife. So when God created them, He put them in the Garden of Eden, a beautiful place that had many trees and fruit. But God told Adam that once you can eat of any of the trees of the garden you want, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it. God said, for the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. So Adam and Eve go away from God, and they're in the garden, and the serpent, you know the story. The devil in the form of a serpent came and tempted Eve and began to ask her questions. Did God really say that you shouldn't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Did God really say that this was going to be the case? And, you know, the serpent says God's really trying to keep you from being like Him, you know. So Eve saw that the fruit was good. It looked good. It was going to make her smart, wise. So she took of the fruit, ate it, that forbidden fruit, and she turned it to her husband, and he also ate. Once they ate that, once their teeth slipped through the flesh of that fruit, a disastrous thing took place. They were walking in disobedience to God's word. Put it simply, they sinned. And because every one of us have come from Adam and Eve, given to us from the chronology of God's word, every one of us have our parentage in that couple. And because of their sin, that sin nature has now been passed down to all men. I want you to see how God handles their situation. It says in verse 7, right after they ate, then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And he said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." The Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed or offspring and her seed or offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." There is more in God's rebuke, but I want to keep it there for just a moment. Every one of us, all the terrible things we read on the news, all the horrible things we've experienced in our life as it relates to sin can be traced back to that one decision that brought sin down upon the whole world. And if you can think of this as God has created Adam and Eve to be this pinnacle, to have relationship, dynamic, transparent, authentic, genuine, deepening, loving relationship with one another and with Him, can you imagine the Father's heart? I mean, granted, He knows all things, but can you imagine the Father's heart that moment? Whereas probably oftentimes before, when Adam would hear the voice of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, Adam would run out from the garden and hear the voice of the Father and run to Him and walk and talk and commune with God without any barrier in between them, without any fear, without any sin, without any veil. He would be able to view God in a glorious state, He also being in some kind of glorious state as well. Can you imagine what that must have been like? And I'll tell you that even though we could try to imagine, there's no way we can fully understand the intimacy of that fellowship between Adam and God because there was no sin. As much as we would want to try, our minds are still marked. Everything we have ever seen, everything we have ever experienced has been marked by sin. We can't fully understand the glory and the wonder and the majesty and the fellowship and the intimacy of that man and woman and God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. But something happened. When Adam and Eve sinned, the next time they hear the voice of the Lord God, instead of running to Him to fellowship with Him, instead of making a straight line as quick as they could, hearing Him and standing and communing with God, instead of running to Him, now they're running from Him. They're hiding from Him. How that had to have broken the Father's heart. He knew this all along, friends. But how much more heartbreaking would it be to actually experience that? To see the man that you literally formed and made as the pinnacle to have dominion over your creation. The one that you made for the express purpose of fellowshipping with you, talking with you to a communicative God. To know that that person, that creation, used to run this way, but now they're running that way. I know you've heard me say several times already that God already knew that was going to happen. Some of you might begin to question God's omniscience when you look back at the text and see that God said, "Where are you?" You might say, "Well, Pastor, if God really knew where they were, then why was he asking the question?" In fact, if you look, God's first 4 correspondences with Adam and Eve are all questions. Where are you? Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten the tree which I commanded you to not eat? And what is this you have done? God literally asked them the who, what, where, and why questions. Why would God ask questions if he already knew the answer? I believe this. When God knew that Adam was hiding, God already knew what tree he was hiding behind and what tree he took the leaves off of, because God made that tree too. I believe when God told Adam, "Where are you?" God wanted Adam to know he was worth looking for. He wanted Adam to know, "I'm searching for you. I'm seeking you." Parents, this isn't so much different. God didn't handle Adam and Eve much different than we handle our kids. How many of your kids have come in with their face blackened with chocolate? And you look at them, and what's the first thing you say? "Have you been in the chocolate?" You know good and well they've been in the chocolate. Why are you asking them if they've been in the chocolate? Because for you, it's important that they recognize and take ownership of what they've done. God was asking the question not because he didn't know, but because he wanted to communicate something to Adam and Eve, and I believe he wanted to communicate something to us. Jesus said that the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. I believe Jesus right now, on this day, the Lord's Day in June, I believe God all over the face of this world in both brick and mortar buildings, in startups, in little used rented stores, in schools, in mud huts, in the underground church in China. I believe God right now is saying all over the world, "Where are you?" He's letting a lost world know that he loves them, and he's seeking them out right now through missionaries, through preachers, through Christians, everywhere they go, communicating that message of God. "Where are you? Because I'm looking for you." The second thing I want you to see is this. Sin brought fear and shame. This is important. This is a critical moment in understanding our own desire to hide our transparency, our own desire to mask and disguise ourselves. Sin brought fear and shame. Rather than loving God and running after God, they were afraid of God. Rather than seeing themselves as they had always seen each other, this even affected their relationship with one another in that they made themselves fig leaf bikinis. They wanted to make sure that they were hidden and disguised and covered because now they're seeing themselves differently. Fear and shame. Sin killed innocence. This is important. Sin killed innocence in Adam and Eve. Because of what they had done, because they had transgressed the one commandment they were given, not strict theology. This was one commandment: don't touch that tree, don't eat of it. Once they had done that, they were no longer innocent, they were guilty. And once they were no longer innocent, once innocence was killed, transparency was the next to fall. Think about it. Once they were no longer innocent, they went to great lengths to cover up what they had done, to do their very best to try to make a covering for the nakedness that they were now in, to try to make themselves as presentable as they could be to God. Basically, what they were doing was disguising, on the best of their ability, disguising their flaw. Rather than being transparent, genuine, they worked diligently to cover up their mistake. It's not so much different for us, is it? Let's be real for a minute. If we think about it, if we're looking at our lives and considering where we are right now as it relates to transparency with God and with man, authentic I'll ask you the question. Are you pretty good about disguising who you really are? I can be. You know, your smile, your cheerful greeting, your perfect selfie, your carefully crafted social media post, all of these things can really disguise who we really are. You know, that smile can hide a broken heart. It can. A cheerful greeting that you give, man, that can hide a broken life. The perfect selfie, that can disguise an ugly heart. A perfectly crafted social media post, man, can't that disguise an absolutely devastated existence? In this world, in this time, probably more so than ever, we have more gifts and talents and abilities at making ourselves into be somebody we're not than any other time in history. We have at our disposal multiple platforms of media, multiple platforms of dress, multiple platforms of appearance to put off this persona of somebody that we want everybody to think we are, while on the inside we know we're not. We have all kinds of resources to push forward this agenda of presenting myself as though I'm all right and I'm okay, and that way nobody bothers me, nobody asks the real question, nobody even thinks to ask the question, because I have done so well in putting up this mannequin of a disguise to make it look like I've got it together. Let me tell you something. This is the secret of Christianity. None of us have it all together. Not one of us. You don't have it all together. Jason doesn't have it all together. Jason doesn't have it all together. And I don't have it all together. Not one of us. But don't we do that? Let's be honest. We're all a work in progress. I met a pastor one time. He said, Jamie, if my church knew who I really was in my heart, they would not stand to listen to me. And I've got to say that there are seasons and times in my heart that I have to echo that. But what do? I smile. I give a cheerful greeting. I make a social media post or take a selfie with my family, all looking so happy and so fine, but you didn't get to see how many takes that took. You didn't get to see the argument. Harlow, smile, look at the camera. Hawkins, quit hitting your brother. Bree, are we ready? I mean, that's what it is. Is it not? Is that not what a family picture is? And I put that out on Facebook and everybody goes, oh, you have such a sweet family. Oh, you guys are beautiful. Like. Oh. Is that not what it's like? Matt Chandler at the Village Church in Texas has as one of their church mottos. This is pushed down into the DNA of the church, and it's this line right here. It is okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. Church, we are great at putting on a mannequin face, hiding the real problems and the dangers and the challenges and the sin and the failure. We don't want anybody to know. We're going to keep people at a distance. With our smiles, greetings, good works, perfect selfies, and carefully crafted social media posts, to say just a few. But here's the crux of this. The problem with that, for you and I that do that, the problem is not that it won't work. Think about it for a minute. The problem is not that disguising ourselves will not work. The problem is this, twofold. One is how long? How long will that disguise hold up? Sin begins in here. sin grows in here. And like a seed coming out of the ground, always going up. Sin that grows and abounds in here always seeks for a way out. Always. There is going to come a time that you can't keep that up. You cannot continue to be an Academy Award winner acting as someone you're not before the disguise begins to fail. And then, what happens when the real you stands nose to nose with the fake you? What happens then? What happens then when who you've been trying to hide eventually comes down and looks you right in the face? All of that work, all of that effort, all of that hope that disguise would just hold on long enough, when that dream is over and you are exposed. What happens? Depression, chemical dependence, flight, all of those number of things can happen once that dream. I told you there were two things. Not saying it won't work, but how long? And secondly, at what cost? What is it going to cost you and I for wearing a disguise, for not being genuine and authentic with others and with God? The first is this, is that there is going to be a hard fall. There is going to be a time where that disguise is not going to be able to be maintained. The real us is going to come out. That's true. That is a biblical principle. What we sow will be reaped. It will be harvested. It will come out of the ground. But secondly, it robs us of authentic, strong, connected, beneficial, real relationships. Some of the strongest relationships I have in my life, no joke, this is not preacher hyperbole. The strongest relationships I have ever had in my life have all come from the people that I have been able to be the most real with. Starting in my home, with my family, and some of my friends that I have been able to open up and just take that suit off. Take that mannequin suit off and realize I'm not innocent. There's no reason to hide. I'm not alone. It robs us of authentic, beneficial, real relationships with other people that struggle too. And thirdly, quite possibly the most important, it robs us of an opportunity to see our need of the grace of God in our day-to-day life. If I keep putting up this shell of someone I'm not, I may want to be that person. I may long to be that person. If I'm focusing my energy in my shell and my disguise, I'm not focusing the energy on the real problem. And that's in here. I'm not saying, God, I've got this problem with envy, and it's eating me up. And I try to act like I don't have it, God, and I've put up this persona that I don't have it. It robs me from being able to say, God, this is envy, and it's eating at me, and this is who I really am, and I need you to forgive me of this and give me the strength to be able to get through this. I need other men in my life that can speak to me about the envy that they struggle with, to encourage me. I need authentic, genuine relationships to help me overcome this monster that's in here that I'm trying to hide. Robs me of an opportunity to see what's really wrong in my life. You might say, my family's fallen apart. Haven't talked to my wife honestly for 3 months. We haven't shared an intimate moment at all for 3 months. But I'm still making it like everything's okay. I'm still putting on Facebook all our happy pictures. You're so worried about what everybody else sees that you're not concerned about the need that God knows in your heart. Final point is this: God would not be deterred. Aren't you glad that God didn't say, all right, Adam, all right, Eve, you messed it up. I washed my hands of it. I'm done. No, that's not how God works. Where sin did abound, God's grace abounded much more, the Bible says. Verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. The third thing is this, is that God provided a remedy. He provided a remedy in the form of a promise. You don't have to be a medical doctor to know that the woman does not have a seed. It is the male that has a seed. This is the first messianic prophecy in Scripture. Here God, at the moment of man's greatest fall, man's first and greatest fall, God says, I got a plan. And He speaks directly to the enemy that tempted them. And He said, you know what? There's somebody coming. And it's going to be the seed of a woman, speaking of the Immaculate Conception, speaking of the miraculous birth of Jesus Christ, of the Holy Spirit being God in the womb of Mary to produce Jesus. He says, you're going to bruise his heel, but he is going to bruise your head. He promised a Redeemer. He promised someone who was going to be victorious over the serpent. And then, in chapter 3, verse 21, the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skins and clothed them. Even their best attempts made out of leaves were not going to work. So what we have here recorded in Scripture is the first death. Because man had sinned and did not have an acceptable covering, God went back to the garden and found some kind of animals, killed them, removed their skin, blood and all, and draped it over his children. A foreshadowing of the covering that would cover every one of us from the cross of Jesus Christ. He didn't just give them a future promise. He gave them a permanent remedy. I told you before that once their innocence was lost, transparency was the next to die. I, as a born-again believer, am made justified in Christ. From God's perspective, I am innocent because of what His Son Jesus did for me on the cross. Because of that, because of the innocence of Jesus Christ and His perfection, and now that is clothing me. Because I am now covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, I am innocent. And if I am innocent, then what does that mean? I can now be transparent. I don't have to worry. I can share my failures. I can share my struggles. I can find people to be honest with about and genuine with. Why? Because I am innocent as far as God is concerned, and I have to have no shame because of what Jesus did for me. It frees me up to have honest, real conversations with Jesus. It frees me up to have real, honest conversations with others around me about struggles. It allows me to tear off who I think I am and reveal who I truly am to God and to others. I ran across a short video. It's just about 45 seconds. I want you to see this real quick. Let me ask you a question. Can you go back to that video, Austin? When he stopped and hugged his mom, do you think that kid would have ever run up and hugged his mom in school had all those circumstances not been around it? That mom, probably for years now, has not been allowed to hold his hand or walk him into school. Right? But because of that relationship, that kid did not care to hug, to run, or to cry because his mom was there. I believe that encapsulates the authentic, genuine relationship. Everybody else in that cafeteria, he did not care about anybody else in that cafeteria except the woman that was his mother. What if we had such a relationship with God? Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I hope this message has helped you. If you made a decision for Christ or would like to speak with a staff member, call 417-624-4585 or email Carrie@FirstJoplin. Please subscribe and rate our podcast. Feel free to share it with your social media circle. We're glad you plugged into the teaching ministry of First Joplin, but would love to meet you in person if possible. Visit firstjoplin.org for information on planning a visit.